Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Terra Prime Live, our 10th year symposium. I'm Darth Anonymous, coming to you from TPLA headquarters. As I said, today we have a kind of special symposium here today. Not only is it our 10th anniversary and we're in our 10th year, it technically goes to April 24th, I think. Today we're here in our 10th year. A lot has kind of happened. As everybody knows, the pandemic's had a pretty big effect on the world. And so we've kind of reflected on our 10 years here. And over the years, Matt and I, when we started back in 2012, our goal was to bring training materials and stuff like that to people who were doing this kind of thing, mostly in choreography at the time, and try to introduce to the scene a little bit of free play and combat experience. Obviously, 10 years later, that has exploded far wider or quicker than we could ever have imagined. It's created lots of diverse groups, lots of diverse styles and methods and rules and all kinds of things that are making the whole thing just very, very exciting right now. One of the things that we, of course, have been involved in from the start as well is developing it as a sport. We've got lots of different rule sets, lots of different groups, lots of different leagues out there, people getting together, putting on the gear, exploring saber combat. Now, over the time that we started this, we're looking to create and give people the impetus to start creating their own stuff and all that stuff. And the same thing was happening in other parts of the world as well, over in Europe, over in Indonesia and in the East and all of that. And as is part and parcel of that is you get a lot of things, and then all of a sudden you get a start of separation. You start getting a fracturing of something that was once very cohesive when you were small and kind of ragtag, now kind of separates and breaks up, very much like something on the surface of water as it starts to glom together and then form, larger pieces and groups of people who feel the same way and are having a particular perspective, and they develop those and they start moving out. So at some point there was a want, and I think a lot of us share this want, which we'll go into here, to help bring everything back together. Because one thing that we were attracted to at the very, very beginning was that this was a great equalizer. The lightsaber could stand in for any weapon. It was not feared by people, so young and old could enjoy it. It wasn't gender specific. It wasn't age, sex, or social strata, or whatever the divisions were. This seemed to bring people together. We come from martial arts where that community feeling does exist, but that community feeling exists kind of in little islands. And as this is a martial art of the future, we want to move into the future. And we want to create something that is not only diverse and widespread and fun and all of that, but we want to develop a community. We want to get back to the things that got us into this in the first place. Because whenever you're doing any kind of work, sometimes you get lost. Right. So today on the symposium, we're going to talk about something that has kind of occurred that I have developed in tandem with a new friend of mine who we've seen on the program a couple of times this year, but we'll go into that story in just a second. These are the Saber Accords. We're going to be talking about that. What are the Saber Accords? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panel here, and we're going to we'll get into it. So I will go through here. First of all, for for our edification and sake, we have Faisal Main or Faisal Main. How do you pronounce your first name? Because I've been saying Faisal because AI, and that right? Okay. Oops, you're still muted. Let me get you. There we go.
It's Faisal, but my friends just call me Fas.
Yeah. All right, Fas.
3 letters, 1 syllable. You can't go wrong.
All right. So about in August of this year, Faisal and I kind of got together and we're talking about this very topic of how do we get this fracturing kind of thing together? Is there something that can do? I kind of dusted off this old idea I had of kind of like a which we were going to use for our kind of mission statement and that kind of thing in a larger sense. But I drew that out here, and then we started talking about it. Do you want to add? Do you want to tell kind of a little bit how this came about too?
Yeah, I suppose. How did it come about, Chad? I mean, we get it, right? Monkeys love their tribes. That's right. That's just ape behavior, right? And as soon as people really start feeling passionate about what they do, they can't help but divide up into these flag-based little independent communities. But I'm going to put this out there, and I don't think I've mentioned this to you before, Chad, right? You put your stuff out there as open source.
Yes.
There is no way, if it hadn't been for your work, if it hadn't been for Ludosport, and these are very, very different approaches to, if you guys hadn't done what you had done, the Silver Sabers would not exist, right? So it doesn't matter how much I think I'm the best or my way is number one or whatever. The bottom line is I wouldn't be here if I wasn't for you. None of this would exist if we didn't have this codependency,
right?
Whether we admit it or not, right? And what we're starting to see now is we're starting to see, prize money going up at tournaments and stuff like that. And the entire community is moving towards an interception with popular culture in that sense. It's going to happen today, tomorrow, whenever. And we just don't have any unity. I mean, one thing that I've learned in the last sort of 7 or 8 years that we've been doing this, when I first hit the ground running, it was very much the confidence that we had about the system that we promoted and blah, blah, blah. But actually, the more that you get to learn, you see that, there's lots of different paths to Rome. It's not that one is right, one is wrong. We're just choosing different paths up the mountain. And when we all get to the top, the view is going to be the same for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. You can ride a donkey. I don't care. But if we don't all agree that we're on the same mountain.
Right.
Right. What is
right. And that's one of our the founding principles we had, Matthew as well, is that we found that even within storage styles, right, the weapons vary a whole lot and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, we're all more alike than we are different, yeah. Right? And that goes even more for the Saber community. Now, also on the panel here, I want to just make a real quick shot through here. We have Matt and Vornaga here, of course, but also joining us, you'll probably recognize Charlie Cummings from the Saber Legion, who is a gracious founding signer of this. Hello, Charlie, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Glad to be here, and happy to be a part of this official kind of signing and inaugural run of the Saber Accords.
Can I just say, Charlie, thank you for putting your faith in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also we have Tony Negron from Aiken Sabers. I could never. I can never. You got to get unmute yourself there. Good old muting.
Okay, how about now? We good?
There we go.
Hey, thanks for putting me on. I appreciate it. I'm in good company, great company here. I have to echo what Faisal said about you. When I started out, you were the first person I saw on how to do this. And then it was Saber Legion, Lightspeed, and so on. And now we've adopted and trained through all different rule sets. But you were the first, and we still use your videos, your old videos, as source material.
Well, I mean, that's very good to hear, because you put a lot of energy into something, and you go out there, and it's good to see that coming back. And I appreciate everybody there, Charlie, Tony, Faz. The way that everything has grown, like I said, and Matthew will agree with me, is beyond our imagination. The fact that I got to go to Paris and teach fencers how to do the lightsaber, right? As difficult as that was. No. But the fact that TSL can have these gigantic tournaments at Combat Con, right, where you have tons of fighters coming in and all of that, and just the whole widespread of it. How worldwide is it now? Not with us today is somebody that we need to mention. So Fez, you want to talk about?
Yeah, and so who do we have here today? We've got Chad representing the TPLA. We have Charlie representing the TSL. We have Vornak as well representing TPLA, and we have Commander from Aiken. And I'm just at this point going to mention, actually, Tony, a large part of the inspiration to bring it all together was the effort you made in creating that little community group for us to discuss everything. That was really what made me see that this was possible, right? That's the first. Yeah, that's really important. Sorry, what was the question again, Chad?
We've got somebody's not joining us here today from
the
Saber Authority. Can you want to?
So the Saber Authority have been to visit us in London on 3 occasions now, and each time we've had the most well-mannered, competent fighters come and engage. We fought under their system, they fought under our system, when we played some games. And I have a lot of respect for the way that they move. They have a totally different strategy. They don't target their head, really. They're all about the forearm, and this. It's completely different to the Silver Sabers way, which is that we go for the throat. That's the target number one. Right? All this sniping for their hands, but it didn't make any difference. The fact that they had this cultural path and we had ours, but the lightsaber just formed this common bond, and we were allowed to have this dialogue and this narrative. And what we discovered that is there was poets on both sides of the fence, right? So then they're going back over there and reporting, wow, do you know what, guys? We're not alone in the world. There are other people out there doing this in a similar manner, not identical, but approaching it with the same heart and passion and sort of desire to get it right. And then when I suggested to him, maybe we should, even though you guys do your thing and we do our thing, maybe there's a common ground. And that was when I'm like, okay, maybe I should invite him to the group that Tony set up where all of these other people are. And the dialogue began. And then the next thing I know, the next thing I know, I'm talking with you 4 times a day, trying to figure out what the text is going to actually look like that brings us together. And,
yes.
The hardest part in that process, just very quickly, was removing contention so that there was some common neutral ground that we can start with. And now we're getting into the technical stuff of what the Accords actually are, and I pass it back to you.
Yeah.
Can I mention something real quickly?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Faisal, thank you for the comments. But the group that we're all in was started by Tom Amorosa from Saber. Yeah. And I got to give credit. He started this a couple of years ago, and I joined then. And then he passed the torch to me because he's busy with a lot of different things. So I can't let that go by that I founded anything. I didn't. He did.
Well, again, what have we got in the Saber community? Uncle Tony. We have a lot of hot-headed, red-blooded guys, all of them running their own sort of organizations and associations. And it is primarily, hairy guys running the show at the moment. And, the safety issues exclude certain body types from taking part. And that's one of the things we'd like to address. But
yes. Well, we'll go into that. So setting up here, we have a lot of people, a lot of representatives from Europe, from America, and unfortunately not physically with us today. We do have the people in Singapore and that kind of thing. And you know, Fight Saber, the choreography group, has come on the show before too. So we're still, you know, there's still a big thing. Today we're really talking about the more combat sporting aspect kind of groups. So there's that. So let's go into exactly what we are talking about. What are the Saber Accords? Well, Faisal and I got together. We started talking about these types of things, and we basically drafted up a kind of agreement where these are the things that I think that we can all agree on, that you know, without any proselytizing or grooming or anything like that, we all just kind of come to the thing to agree with, to you know, in agreement with. And it's essentially a 5-point thing where we have 5 points here, which is number 1 is safety, number 2 is fair play, number 3 is professionalism, 4 is diversity, and 5 is autonomy. So those are the big categories, right? And we'll talk about each of them, you know, as we go through here. But we can all kind of agree that we want a safe, professional, you know, place that has fair play. We can have fun, not worry about. We can be ourselves, right? And we can encourage the diversity of methods and all of that kind of thing that's happening in the Saber community. So and so we drafted this up and started approaching people in the community. So here today we obviously have Charlie, who's from the Saber Legion. Tony kind of is acting as our ambassador, so he's kind of like a spokesperson who's helping us kind of go around. So he's kind of got an inside track on this as well. But Foss, do you have anything you want to kind of start out with this kind of with this discussion? Or
well, a lot of this is really basic common sense, right? When we talk about fair play, having qualified referees is just a basic requirement. You know, having first aiders on site as part of the professionalism clause, just again, basic stuff. Making sure that people have made adequate mitigation against serious injury. Again, you know, these are basic things. I think what really opened my eyes to the work that you had already put in before I called you, right? I don't have a problem with admitting where people have done the work, right? The hard work was this. And the thing that really made me think was you included diversity and autonomy as virtues, right? Now, what are we dealing with? The big problem we've got is we've got this community of hotheads, right? Everybody's right.
Right.
Somehow, Tony has this tone of voice and he just manages to keep the place calm so that we can have a discussion. And now that we're having that discussion, the first thing that absolutely needs to be put on the table, professionalism, safety, fair play, these things we do not really need to argue about, because let's all agree, we don't want to see people getting hurt and we don't want to see people getting cheated, right? That's really simple stuff. But autonomy, what do you mean by that, Chad? What is diversity? What does that mean? Yeah, we do have a problem with the sport being dominated by big guys, right? Why is that? That's not diversity. That's quite conformist. And autonomy, what does that mean? Well, like, I got my way, you've got your way. So if we come together, which one of us is going to dictate to the other person what's going on? Because neither of us can accept that, because we have communities built and cultures that have emerged around the specific practices in each academy. So if people aren't free to pursue the LED Saber in their own passionate way, then actually all we do is we form a kind of boundary that prevents them from growing. We have to acknowledge that even though I think I'm right, I do, right? That's me being a bit of a, right? And I have to step back and I have to see the picture. And that's what the Accords do. It gives me a perspective where I'm not seeing it from my academy's eye. I'm stepping back and I'm seeing my academy as part of a community that goes around the world. And all of us need safety kit. All of us need to understand X, Y, and Z. And if one person's focusing on this in one part of the world and somebody else, let's share our notes and we can sort of halve the amount of time we need to put in to take us from this sort of grassroots environment to something that is like, you know, a professional option for educators and physiotherapists and the likes. Because, you know, the lightsaber, again, what else have we got? It's a really light weight. It's not a heavy resistance training device. So from a physiotherapy perspective, right? But if we don't have health and safety basics in there, people who practice get hurt, and whatever benefits they pick up are eclipsed by, you know, injuries. Right. So we've got to deal with that, and we've got to we have to allow for people who are small to have a chance against people who are big.
Right.
And that's not possible if people are hitting through parries and just bam, bam. There's no game. The game is always going to go to the person with the biggest boots. And I'm just tired of watching that. It's boring. Yeah. So we got to change it. This is how we do it. We just say, look, make sure people are safe. We need an objective measure for what brutality with a lightsaber looks like. We don't have one yet. But if we don't talk,
and we can't come up with that unless everybody is involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Yes. So yeah, that's a good encapsulation of our motivation here. Is that there are places that we want to go with this sport, with the hobby that we never thought were possible before, because we just thought this was kind of like a lark. It was a gateway drug into harder martial arts, you know. But it has now become its own thing, and it now even has its own concerns and stuff like that.
If I may just quickly interject,
sure.
I'm going to take it one step further, right? It's not reasonable to expect human beings to permanently injure each other in the pursuit of preserving these ancient art, right? You train with steel, you're going to lose a finger. That's just something you have to accept, right? At some point, you're going to get hurt because you're moving at full speed with a device which is blunted, but right? The lightsaber makes it possible for us to make mistakes and come back and learn from the mistake as opposed to missing a chunk. I think the lightsaber presents a new vector for the exploration and preservation of these traditional kinesiological sciences.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. Very eloquently put as well. But so yeah, so that's one of those things of I mean, it's obviously one of the concerns, the safety thing, but as you said, the autonomy part of it. And you were saying, you know, smaller people versus larger people, literally, but we also mean that figuratively too. Yeah. We want to see the interjection of new people coming into the art and into the sport in all these different ways. That's kind of why we like rule sets are nice like that because they're not specific to a training method. You can come in and out of them. For example, Charlie, if you your perspective on this, because Saber Legion is that kind of thing. It's the league that's not, you know, people are coming with their own training and they're that is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically we're a forum, right? We're a platform for people out there. And one of the things that it helps us look at the Accords and look at really the community in general, right? Is while we obviously, you know, and as Faisal said, we all have our own piece of the pie, or the only thing that we're looking at. But the difference is we're not in TSL, we're not training people other than allowing people to fight, right? So there's nothing that limits somebody from being a TSL fighter, but also being a member of these schools, right? Because in essence, you bring in what you have. You obviously learn by doing it, but you bring in, and so really the way we look at it is it's very community based, right? So it's all community. And one of the reasons that we're so on board with these is that we all do better when we all do better. And this, I think, goes to that mountain that you were talking about earlier, right? I mean, that's what this all is, right? We're a community. And so we have different aspects, we have different rule sets, we have different things. But really, what it is it's, and part of what we looked at from the diversity is we also looked at, that, and also kind of added a bit to that for as far as inclusivity. Right.
Yeah.
We want to be really
Right.
super inclusive. We want to be engaging. We want everybody to be able to do it. Part of that comes from, the one thing that you did mention about the lightsaber, the LED combat saber being, an elegant weapon, right? I mean, we have it that you can see it where it lightly touches, right? I don't have to cleave somebody from
Right.
ear, from end to end, right? I don't have to work about edge alignment. I'm just touching somebody. You can work on one of the things that we talk about, or that I always work on when I have new people that are coming into TSL, right? And let's say that the minimum that they have to get started, right, is the helmet, gloves, and groin protection. And so that's what they're going with. Well, you know what? The helmet and the gloves on the back of the hand are their only target. If I'm fully armored and you've only got that, then from what it works for me is it works for me on control. It works for me to control that, and it works on you getting over, the idea that hitting somebody with this is it's foreign to most people, right? And
Yep.
and let's be honest, a lot of people, the one bridge that we get, right? HEMA does, and a lot of the martial disciplines, yes, obviously any sport, a bladed sport, or stick or a blade, right? Any martial discipline or anything like that, all you got to do is substitute an expensive flashlight, and you've got what we do, right? But the difference is that this also comes from, we have an equal number of people who are enamored by Star Wars, who have never participated in any sort of organized sport or any sort of discipline before. So, right. So we have that juxtaposition of the real hardcore person that, I've spent 20 years studying, rapier, and I, and like to go for the throat because that's what you're supposed to do. Right. And at the same time, you have somebody who is like, listen, man, all I've done is played with, wrapping paper cardboard tubes, and all I've done is knock them against each other. Right. And so it's really allowing the whole gamut, all of us, to kind of work together. And I think the best part about the Accords and what it does is it's sort of standardizing. It's putting that all out there, right? Any school that wants to do that, or any different fighting, league or anything like that, listen, if you want to be part of this, this is the minimum that you have to have for all of us to be able to have and say, look, we can all do this. Because I'll be honest, there's nothing that stops somebody, and I want somebody that likes this to be able to fight heavy in TSL, to go light grade into light speed, to go armorless, and to go, Ludo sport, to go wherever. I mean, there's it's if we limit what anybody does out there, all we're doing is limiting ourselves, and we're inhibiting our ability to grow as a community.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing.
I look at it in a way that all of you, Disney's getting ready to release a slew of lightsaber combat type stories. With the popularity of that, we're going to get a lot of people wanting to get into lightsaber type sports because nobody's afraid of fighting with lightsabers. So we're going to see dojos across the country, maybe at a minimum, the Accords. You should be a part of the Accords, and it should be a certification that you hang up on your wall that says, I believe in these things. So when they showed me the Accords, being a big picture man and having a school, I said, every school in the country should be part of these Accords for just that reason. It says we agree with what's in here, which is safety and security and all the rest that are part of that document. It's a no-brainer to be a part of it. I'm glad to see TSL because TSL has done a marvelous job, Charlie. Safety, safety, safety. You can't do this until you're 16. I'm a school, so I'm different. I can take kids that are 14. I have a little controlled environment in a school setting, but I can tell you from a charter, not every charter is as great as some of the really good charters that you have in there. And guys show up and they don't get the required level of training that they should. But still, your rules are great, and now we have another set of bigger rules that are going to come out, and we're all going to sign to them and say these are the things that we believe belong in lightsaber combat. It's a pretty amazing thing that we're finally all talking to each other. I've only been in this a few years, so I'm the new guy, even though I'm the oldest man probably of all of us here. And it's just really fascinating to watch how close all the community is getting, that we're all talking to each other and that we're all in agreement with things just like the Accords.
Yes. And I'm coming from a kind of an athletic background. I grew up in an athletic family, meaning my father was the tennis coach here for the U of M tennis team. So like you can see all the things that kind of happen with sport. And one of the things that can definitely happen with sport, especially a sport like ours, or snowboarding or something like that, is you will definitely start to have an influx of people who don't have any connection to what started the activity. They're just interested in the activity, right? As this gets more. And I've started getting students who have no interest in Star Wars. Coming to these classes, and they're just in it for, oh, cool, you know what I mean? And one of the things that, as things get more popular, is a tendency is certain things will kind of like get ahead, and then they can start to become monolithic. And we definitely don't want that to happen, because like you said, from me and Matt working in my backyard, right, having it germinate into just all of these different things all over the place is crazy. There's no way we want that to stop, right? That's the whole point, right? Now we have, like I said, we have different ways of coming at this. We have different ideas. Yes, all of these things we can agree on. Yes, I mean, obviously, I think that all schools should join up, but we'll get into that near the end, as because that's a little bit more complicated process, but we'll fill you in at the end. Anyway, not only does it do all this, it shows us our agreement. You know, we all agree this is what the sport is about, right? Whatever the rule set, whatever the type of style, whatever that is, this is what the sport is about. Kind of like wushu, kung fu being a overarching sport, but it's multifaceted. And you can say what happens in Baji or Wing Chun or anything like that can conform to a certain number of certain principles.
Here's the beautiful thing, right? So as Charlie was saying, the TSL is for, right? Now we're a syllabus, and that syllabus is applied in all the different forms that anyone wants to take it to. So we have diversity not only in what we're doing, but why we're doing it as well. So like, it's something that has to really get out there to folks. It's like, we don't mind if you're choreographers, right? If we don't mind if you're doing choreography. I mean, even though this really is focused primarily on the sport, which has the highest vector for injury and risks and stuff like that, but even choreographers have so much to learn from the methods and training styles of X, Y, and Z. What can you do to reduce the possibility of injuries? What mitigations can you make? We have to be a neutral space where people can come, share their information, take that information, go back, take it to themselves, and have this constant circulating data coming back. And I've got a really interesting piece of data for you. For example, we just ran an event this weekend, and I had a student who 10 years ago was in a motorcycle accident, and they've got a steel plate in their skull. They picked up a concussion, right? With a mid-grade blade through a 1600 Newton Olympic mask in a semi-contact environment. And I have watched the replay 20 times, and there just was nothing in there that could cause a concussion. But I'm letting you all know that
well, that's a good point, right? If we share information, things like this can happen, because I happen to know that it doesn't matter any of the out extra things. I mean, you can get a concussion just from your head going too fast, right? So I do know that people have gotten concussions through the mask in certain areas, if it's not fitted correctly, if it's not,
I mean, it's just food for, isn't it? I mean, you think you've done everything you can, but the reality is I've seen you wearing that leather cowl over the top of your mouth, and I've always thought it was excessive because it's hot, right? But actually, I've gone away to that student and I said, if you want to do this ever again, I'm not going to allow you unless you add further layers of absorption to the mask, because clearly something, if this resonance takes place between those ears, you're going down again. And I can't have somebody taking a second concussion in class, because
that's actually why I like the leather hoods the best, because they make it much more quiet.
Yes.
Getting hit in a fencing helmet with a polycarbonate blade is loud,
right? Especially if it's not coated steel. If it's actually
like whang,
right.
It's nothing. I'll be honest. It's nothing compared to hitting that plastic hockey pauldrons, right? The shoulder pads.
Sometimes,
right?
I had a problem in France with my leg protectors, which are like, catchers things, because they've got such a nice space between the plastic and this. They're really loud, so you can just like tap them and they're like bang, and everybody was like, oh, you're hitting too hard. No, he's not hitting too hard. It's just loud. But
I think one thing too, and it's just a quick follow-up. We have seen over the years, now we're getting ready for our 7th annual tournament this next summer, right? And we've had over 8 years. We missed one with COVID, right? But over these years, we've seen, and our rules have changed because we've seen things that have happened that nobody has anticipated, right? We introduced the gorget after our first tournament, right? Because we started having way too many neck shots that were getting underneath the bibs on masks, right? Then after that, we even went to stainless gorgets, right? So that we have that during the tournaments type of thing, because again, the different levels we started seeing, we don't have, our points are rounded, right? So it'll hit and they'll slide. And so there's a lot more that you'll need from that. One that I bring this up in particular is because we require back of the head protection on all of our masks. Why? Because these wrap around. I might get hit on the side of the mask, but with a mid-grade or even a heavy grade blade, it'll wrap around and it can hit me in the back of the head. And so that's why we institute all of those. But we didn't come out by being like, yep, you need everything, because just like everybody else, TSL, we started in somebody's backyard too, wearing, shop goggles and leather gloves, right? And realized that, that wasn't going to cut it. And so we started gearing up from there. So it happens, but you have to recognize, and again, this is a base level for everybody to start at while we're there. If one of the things that we were able to do is all of the tenets from the Accords were things that we already had in place, right? But we're a pretty mature organization. We've been around for a while now, right? We've had a lot of people that have done something. This is something that gives now an even playing field. Anybody else, and you had mentioned that earlier, somebody new that comes into the scene, they can say, hey, this is what I want to do. If this is what I want to do, this is the minimum that we have to be able to do in order to be successful.
Yes, the concepts behind the Accords are pretty common in martial or probably most Saber groups, and a lot of them are going to be implicit. They're kind of built into the background, but by putting out the Accords, by making them a more explicit set of standards, you fill in the gaps where a group or a club may not have had all of the pieces that we've been considering and discussing.
Right, exactly. Somebody might pick up a piece here, like Saber Legion and the bib, right? As far as back of the head and back of the neck protection, that's obviously something we also require for a different reason. Obviously, yes, blades can wrap, and contrary to popular belief, heavy grade blades do not flex less. They are heavy, and they can actually flex more depending on what you're hitting at the time. I've had many a kid go up to parry something here, and it goes boop and still gets them. So there's that. But yeah,
well, I mean, where are we? So we've got these plans in place. We've got 5 virtues, right? So essentially there's 5 words that we need to remember. So we had safety, professionalism, and fair play. Now, safety, for example, when it comes to, I don't like armor. I come from Tai Chi background, and armor is really an anathema to us. But the reality is that gradually over the years, we've realized that even in a semi-contact environment, you have to armor up as if it was full contact. And that does mean back of head protectors. That does mean clavicles need to be covered. Acromion protected, elbows and knees. Oh my God, right? And it's like, initially when we started, we thought, oh, nobody's going to be crazy enough to swing it like a baseball bat. And we were right. But as people get better, they repeat light touches to the same zones over a 4-hour session. And the tissue damage you see from 20 light touches at full speed is the same as you're going to see from somebody whacking it like a baseball bat. It might not be deep, but it's going to take you out of action for 4 days, right? And you're just like, okay, the Saber Legion have demonstrated that wearing armor can be cool. So therefore, I'm going to have to eat humble pie and tell everybody to armor up. Or we stick to choreography, right? So there's the safety straight away. This gradual ramping up of the minimum standards, and we went from just gloves and masks to the whole works now. And we tried to implement a rule where we had to have chest armor. I mean, we're quite good on maintaining. We don't have thrusts allowed in our particular rule set, so that facilitates like a little bit more of a relaxation with the gorget, for example. But gradually we're getting there, and I'm finding that there's no place where you can cut corners. You basically have everything covered, because even when you don't expect it, someone you trust is still going to get concussed because of something that you just didn't anticipate.
Yep. And I remember what I was going to say. The gorget and the back of the head protector, not only because it's wrapping around, but I remember I had a student who was a neurosurgeon, right, working specifically a lot on the spine, right? And we talked about concussions. He goes, I'm not so much worried about concussions as I am worried about cervical fracture. That's a deadly thing, right? So the fact that we have the gorget that goes around the neck and the back of the head protector can protect the back of your neck. So while, yes, 2 different observations, right, both of them true, right, lead to the same conclusion, right? We get the benefit of both, right? If we don't know about each other, though, we can only talk about one of the benefits.
That's it. Now, here's another thing.
Go ahead.
Our combat is non-stop. So there are a lot more occasions when somebody's back is inadvertently towards their opponent. Because we don't stop the fights on each hit. So, just some of the video footage I've got is gorgeous. Some proper executions coming in against well-protected necks, right? Well-protected, foam, proper. You're like, if somebody goes to one knee and looks up like this, just take them off at the neck. Just remember to pull the blow and blah, blah, blah. And it's legit. It was, and these are things I would rather tell them to armor up than have to write 20 sort of separate commentaries on the rules to try and figure out workarounds. So the rules have to be simple. And the simplest of rule is that you got to suit up, guys. That's it.
Well, and if I can really interject, there's one thing that you mentioned in there. And there's two reasons why we do it, right? Obviously, well-trained, well-disciplined fighters, obviously you can pick spots, you can do things, right? But this goes back to the accessibility and inclusivity, right?
Yes.
We want people at all levels. So you're going to get those people that are just coming in off the street. And so we armor up for protection against those people just as much, right? Because they're going to come in, they might be swinging a little bit too hard. Their adrenaline's going, right? They've never done this before. They're not going to realize that, you know, that I'm thrusting and I'm going to actually thrust you in the abdomen. It's something that doesn't have a lot of flex, right? Things like that. So that's the first part of it, right? And then the second is really as the sport starts amping up, because I'll be honest, that's one of the things, Faisal, that you said is the level of even training, right? So the better that they want, now they want to do more, right? I have people, you know, I have fighters that they train all year round. They officially train, right? This isn't a hobby anymore. This is something that they're actually working towards. They care about how they do. And so obviously the level of competition is going to keep amping up as well. So you have to keep those, you know, with safety in mind too, because it's, you know, we never anticipated when people first came out with these LED combat sabers, nobody thought that they were going to go to the levels that they are at right now,
No.
right? And with the sky's the limit, you know, we just have nothing but to go up. And again, tapping that, getting that base, standardizing it is just good for all of us right now.
Yeah, and that's very true. Like I always say, and we'll move on to another thing here, so it's not a safety lecture this whole time. But one of the things I always try to remind people here, and Matt probably has the most experience fighting with swords than any of us here. He's been doing it for so very long. It doesn't matter how long you've done it, right? If the other person isn't wearing gear, you're not going to feel comfortable hitting them, you know, so you can't perform how you can. And for people who are beginning, they don't even realize that's happening, right? They don't realize that they're altering their movements and stuff because they don't actually want to hurt this person, right? Even if they get angry, even if they lose control, it's still not a something. And as somebody who's unfortunately gotten into a lot of, you know, non-consensual fights, you know, it's an entirely different can of worms, right? There's like so it's a problem. It's like we're always trying to kind of replicate conflict, but we're never ever really going to get there. But
yeah, so I mean, let me just interject here. So yeah, so you're talking about sports and martial arts, right? But if as a community what we do is replicate HEMA with glowing sticks or create another version, epee or saber with glowing sticks,
right,
we're not really accepting the lightsaber for what it is. And I said lightsaber, not LED saber, right? The fictional device has a particular aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing. If you've got a lightsaber in your hand, you are doing it for the camera as well. Right. That's just a simple fact of what makes LED saber, you know, so appealing in some regard. Because it doesn't really matter if you can pose nicely in front of a camera. That is actually enough to get people to class every week.
Right.
That actually is enough. They have no intention of fighting ever. They enjoy being with the people who are on that journey as well. But it's like we said, we talked about people, you know, out of all the students we've got, maybe 1 in 10, maybe less than that, has any previous martial arts experience whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And now we are indeed seeing people who don't even know what Star Wars is, but their friends have dragged them on to something that they're really enjoying. Yep. And is beginning of something completely independent of the pop culture that spawned it in the first place. Right. But we don't want to jeopardize that. So we've talked about safety. I want to talk about professionalism because, like,
that's where I was going to go. Yeah.
I think the first thing, you know, based on what Charlie was saying a moment ago, I used to run open events, which were just buy a ticket, turn up, get a saber, put the mask on, get in the ring, see how you do, right? because the community was so small that you couldn't exclude anyone. You had to allow it. But then we started to notice people who had never done any training whatsoever. They never held a lightsaber before in their life, were being given sabers and thrown in the ring to see if they might win. And the injuries that were emerging were unacceptable. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do open tournament anymore. I'm only going to invite members of academies that have demonstrated that they understand that we're coming from the same place. And a large part of the Saber Accords is I don't need to like know everyone personally. If they've got the stamp on their website, then they should be adhering to, and you know, again, we couldn't quite get the armor to work. We couldn't quite, but it doesn't matter because the pledge that we've made is to continue trying until we get it right. It doesn't matter that it failed at this previous event where we wanted to mandate that clavicle protection and everything else, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. The armor we had not good enough. So it was just like go back to how we did it before. Are we in breach of our commitment to the Accords? Only if we said that we weren't going to try. Yeah, only if we say that we're giving up on that idea. We're not. It didn't work. I'm going to come up with something else and see if that works instead, right? So, professional.
Yeah, that is that, and that's an example of professionalism, and that's what we're looking for. It's and this is a problem in martial arts too, right? Professionalism is getting martial arts schools and tournaments and stuff like that to have professional things. So as far as schools go, and professional teaching, there's lots of you know stuff out there as resources for people who are running schools about ethics and all that kind of thing. We don't necessarily have to go into that, but the effort to keep your instructors trained, you know, well, and not just in like the stuff, right, but trained in instructing people, because as one of the things that I tell people who say, oh, I really want to learn this, and I really want to teach it. And then like 6 months into it, they go, I want to go teach it. And it's just like, well, hold on a second. You got 6 months. It's like, what if a student comes to you with this problem? I don't know, you know, because you'll have lots of students who come to you with totally different issues that they have to overcome. And you have to figure out how to get them there. Also, you have to kind of learn how to, you know, how not to teach. You know, and that one of the best ways of doing that is having people do it badly to you, or you to go through things, or to say, oh, I like the way my teacher does this, really clicked for me, whereas this doesn't. And that kind of goes into that. Now, if we get into like the leagues and stuff like that, professionalism comes into reffing rules, right? One of the things that will kill any tournament in any sport is if your officiation is garbage, right? If people can't depend on your calls, it doesn't matter if you have a team playing in there, if you're providing those types of services or whatever, and in any sport, if you suck at that, bye. I mean, that's a serious thing, and professionalism is definitely one of those things that's kind of covered, you know, under that. So there's lots of different ways that kind of express, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, again, because of the envelope in which we operate, we are working with vulnerable adults. We are working with children. We teach. I mean, we have 4-year-olds in class on Sunday mornings. He's 5-year-old. We teach them, and in order to do that, our instructors have to have enhanced criminal background checks. They have to be qualified first aiders. They have to have undertaken safeguarding training. They have to have all of these things, and they also have to be insured with professional indemnity up to a certain amount coming through Sport England or Sport UK as this. And this is specifically because, like I mentioned before, you know, we're not a forum, we're not this, we are trying to get the program into schools. Now, we've mapped that pathway. We've mapped it. We know what people need to do, and there's nothing that stops anyone from wherever they are around the world from pursuing these same professional qualifications. But if you do want to open a class for children, or where you are in, because let's not forget one critical thing we haven't mentioned yet, talking about the diversity and the inclusivity, the lightsaber has an incredible capacity to inspire people with special needs to pursue and remain in the practice, right? And for those who've been excluded from traditional physical exercise things because they don't necessarily work in group environments, guess what? Inside the mask, you're alone, right? And we need to take them on that journey. We hold their hands. These I love this. This is what it's all about. I have classes full of autistics who finished our level 2. They've done their assessments. The next step for them would be buy masks and get involved. But we're not going to ask them to do that because they don't like the sound of being hit in the face, right? That's fine. But the physical literacy, the learning to be sensitive to your body, to breathe, to think, the pathway to being able to credibly instruct at that level that's professionalism. Yeah. You just want to do it on one level, that's fine. But if you want to go all the way, there has to be a map that you can follow with a legend and breadcrumbs saying, look, if you want to approach a university, this is what they're going to ask of you. If you want to approach school, this is what they're going to ask of you, right? Get all that, because all the people teaching soccer and all the people teaching baseball, they have this stuff, right?
And if they don't, they try to hide it, and then it comes out and they get canceled.
Right.
But yeah, and it goes like you said too. It's not necessarily that you're doing everything right now, right? It's that you have that desire to do it. You say you recognize that as important, and that is something that I am going to strive for. I'm going to strive for professionalism because yes, there are gradations of it. You get better at it as you get more experience, all of that kind of thing. But it's something that we definitely put forward, and I think is a very, very important part of this. Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, real quick.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I've got two feelings on it, right? So we have, again, when we talked a little bit before, our difference is again, we're not a school, right? So we don't have that sort of training thing, but we have to have the professionalism, and you mentioned it again earlier, right? So this is kind of a twofold thing. So we build in credibility for our fighting by also offering a different path, right? And so a different path might be for some of those that want to fight, or one of those that might want to fight a little bit less. And that is, we have our certified line judge training, and then we also have our training to become directors, and then ultimately to become national directors. We have a counselor type of thing to where you actually have to do it. Now, does that make people automatically better? Absolutely not. But we're starting to standardize, and then also to offer a different path for people, right? I often, as a fighter myself, I think the best directors and the best line judges are those that fight themselves, right? But at the same time, we get in our own head. We start to think, hey, this is what I would have done in that. Maybe I saw something a little bit different. And so we all need that standardization. We all need that professionalism. And, Chad, as you said before, if people don't look at our fights as being fair, then they're not going to come, right? They're not going to do it. They're not going to participate. Now, at the same time, we are beholden to the fact that we have what we have, right? Not everybody is going to be line judging, is going to have lots of years of line judging and those types of things, but we have to accommodate for that, right? So we have built into our rules, we have 4 line judges and a director, right? That's in essence, 5 sets of eyes that are all watching two bright blades flashing against each other as fast as they can. So, but again, that's where we see it, and where we have that professionalism, because we have to have that to kind of standardize it, right? To have that, to have why should you feel like it's okay to come to our tournament if we don't know? We're not at a position where we have a professional directing staff yet, right? We don't have that, so we need to build in our credibility so that what it has, what we can lay out for it. And so that's another one where we totally get on.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Faisal.
Yeah. So what I was going to say in terms of professionalism, I was a military officer, and then I taught junior ROTC for decades. So when you're in a teaching situation that we're in the schools, you have to have professionalism. You give up certain things like your political beliefs or your religious beliefs. You never discuss any of that, and you don't put it out on social media that you think this one should have been elected or that one should be elected. Professionalism is if you open up a school, you have documentation so that the students come in and it's transparent of what they're going to need to do to gain in rank. Professionalism is training your students to be not only good fighters, but good referees and good line judges. I've dealt with every organization in the United States. I have to say they've all got everything in writing. They've put out what they expect from their executive councils down to their charter reps. And they're professional, certainly in Saber Legion and also in Lightspeed. So I've talked to Kang quite a bit in Lightspeed, and he has a certification process just like they do in Saber Legion. The Accords is one more part of that professionalism. And there aren't a lot of schools. There's maybe 20, 25 schools in the country that I've been able to find. And if any other schools open and I find them, then we should be looking at what they have in terms of professionalism. How are you training your kids? How are you training your instructors? What are you training? What kind of safety equipment do you require from your students? All those kinds of things.
Yes. Faz, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm with Tony and all of that. I just wanted to again point out we're playing catch up. I'm not really a big sports guy. I'm an old school martial arts guy. So us doing and that kind of stuff, I've never coached a team internationally before. It's just they wouldn't let me go, so I had to do it. So we done it. And again, I'm playing catch up. 4-line judges, no less. 4-line judges, no less. And there has to be, you call it a director, we call it mama. Mama's in charge in the ring, right? And mama's job is only one thing: make sure no one's getting hurt, because everybody else is counting the hits and the arcs and the engagements and everything. And where did we learn this? Where did we learn this? We learned this by watching things like TSL, right? We've got to share. We have to share. I didn't need to waste 7 years trying all the other options before I suddenly and said, how do they do it? They know what they're doing. Let's have a look. Ask. I didn't even know who to ask.
Right? And that's another good point about professionalism is like professional teams, professional sporting organizations, even collegiate, and stuff like that. If somebody comes upon a particular safety thing or something happens, that information is instantly shared amongst the entirety of like the coaching body, right?
Yeah.
So, research comes out on closed head injury, right? You have organizations, you have all this kind of stuff that are set up that just disseminate that information. We need to have that kind of thing set up too. Obviously, this isn't it, but this will lead to it. But that's that part of sharing, which I think is part of professionalism that I don't think a lot of people understand, that when you're insular and you're closed off, that's not exactly a professional position to maintain. You can, but you have to be very niche. You have to be like, Carl Thompson or, Stradivarius or something like that. Somebody who's got that type of, draw, but otherwise, we exist in a continuum amongst other people.
I mean, people are welcome to be isolated through choice. Nobody's required to sign, and like everybody's welcome to say no and then to change their mind, or to say yes and change their mind as well. But I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that isolated creatures tend not to survive, and it is incumbent on us, and it's one of the reasons I was like so adamant that we need representatives like Tony to be ambassadors and to take this out there and to communicate, because I'm fine in front of a spreadsheet or looking at algorithms, but talking to people is not something that I find particularly easy. And I respect and understand that it's only through this collaboration that we'll have all of the tools at our disposal for each of us, because none of us have all of it. None of us can do this on their own.
No, it also it's an acknowledgement that we're not really doing this alone. That whether we like it or not, we all help each other.
Yeah.
And that's something that we.
Do you remember when blades used to come popping out every 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Right, that's changed, right? Do you remember? I mean, we used to have Sabers that would expire in 2.5 hours battery life, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get 8, 9, 10 hours out of them now. Things have changed because we pushed for that change, right? And all of these developments in isolation are not successful. It's only when everything's going into the one pot that we're going to have like a major manufacturer on. At the moment, I know there's a lot of stuff happening with LGT, but the big thing for me, really, I'm kind of desperate to get manufacturing locally happening again. I don't like having to outsource to China constantly, because when it goes wrong, all I can do is send it to landfill and buy another one, right? There's got to be a way. We throw everything in the pot and we see more options for everybody coming.
Exactly. Yep, definitely.
Well, with that said, real quick, I'll say there's a big change within our community and in the sabering community in itself, right? I've been here long enough and seen the combat aspect, going from, everybody with the buzz wow and everything like that, to now just going to everybody fights with a stunt for the most part, right? Because these things will get broken. You need that type of thing. Nobody wants to spend. And I'll be honest, the saber makers have seen that too, right?
Yeah.
They've seen it. They've gone from like, hey, you guys are the future, to, hey, none of you guys are buying any of our stuff, right? Because it's tough. It's tough. As much as I love Vader's Vault, but it's tough to go fight with a $700 saber that I know I'm going to break.
Even if it makes coffee for you, it's still not the saber for the fight, right?
Right.
Every sport has its.
That's the same thing with
sport has its tool it needs.
Don't buy a weapon that you want to use to fight with, that you're unwilling to fight with, or potentially sacrifice.
Right. So like these swords here, right? These Chinese swords here, like this one from LK Chen. Yes. Are they real? Yeah. Could they kill you? Yeah. Can you fight with it? Yeah. Oh, this is one of my favorite swords. Would I ever use this in a fight? Are you kidding me? Look at this. Right? That's like putting your Maserati into a demolition derby.
I'm gonna break your heart now. Yep. I'm really gonna break your heart. I have downstairs an LK Shen Miao Dao that when it sits on the floor, the pommel is resting on my ample mo stick, right?
Oh, yeah, I got the chunk.
And I'm so proud of the blackening on the blade where my sweat has eaten into that steel, right? And just like, I know, I'm not precious about these things. I have old guitars and I know one day it's not going to take a new string. I know my steel, if I train with it every day, it is disposable. I accept that. And one of the philosophies behind some of the sabers, our sabers are designed to be destroyed and repaired infinitely. And I think that's the reality of it. And this is why I'm adamant. Yeah, sure. Look, guys, if you want, and we don't sell our sabers cheap, they're expensive because they're handmade. People can choose. They've got all of this stuff coming in from offshore. They can have the coffee making Wi-Fi, Bluetooth enabled, everything Saber with bangs and whistles and AIs and whatnot. Right for you though, so don't get too happy. Yeah. And then you've got the people who are going to say, right, I've been doing this 3 years. I'm sick and tired of having to do this every time something goes wrong. Can I have a saber that I can fix at home myself? Sure. And I'll show you how to fix it yourself. And I never want to hear your number on my phone again because your saber's broken. Here's how you take care of it yourself. And what we've done is we've created something more than a market. It's more than a market. It's now an education program. It's now pedagogy. And it's built into the product itself by refusing to allow the Cylons to have control over our
Well, we can get into that specific discussion later, at another time. But the particulars of it really don't matter. As we're seeing here, these are the reasons for these needs. So like the safety, the fair play, the professionalism, these all kind of go together. The last two also go together: diversity and autonomy. Right. So diversity is diversity within us, as Charlie pointed out. Inclusion, is probably a better term to use for a group or something like that. For the activity, we want to have a diverse group of people of all skill levels, ages, backgrounds,
disabilities.
What?
People with all kinds of disabilities as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, everybody from as every possible demographic. Now that's not an easy thing to accomplish because for obvious reasons, but so the diversity of our groups and of the people that we want involved is very, very important, and part of that is also the autonomy of everybody, not only within autonomy of groups and organizations, but autonomy of individuals, and that this is something that's very important to us because it's what draws us to this weapon to begin with. It's whether we're into it for sport, whether we're into it for choreography, whether we're into it for just training or collecting or putting on the wall, we've all seen something of ourselves in this, right? It doesn't necessarily have to come from Star Wars, but whatever it is spoken to us, and that's why we come there. And we want to make sure that aspect of it remains, because that's what builds the community. That's what makes the people who go to TSL meet, right, have that camaraderie. It's not just they may be all strangers. They never met each other in their life, but you don't act as strangers in these situations because you all have this common touchstone, right? So it's so the reason we have these included, right, diversity and autonomy, and the reason that they go together is because they're kind of linked, right? We want people to be diversity minded, right? And we also want people to be able to be independent, right? And so that we can have these new things happen or just new discoveries or what have you, so that things can move in that way. Now I know TSL has a very diverse group, of course, people from all over and all kinds of walks of life.
One of the things, real quick, if I can interject, one of the things that has been an interesting part of diversity to think about it, and as we're getting a bigger footprint, one of the big things is over COVID, we actually added 6 and now 7 new countries, right, to basically to TSL. And there was a number of countries that we could add in Central and Latin, in Central and Southern and South America. Now, the reason that I bring up the diversity is for us to understand, and the inclusivity is while it might be super easy where I live in Minnesota to go to the Play It Again Sports and get a used pair of, hockey shoulder pads for $5, in Panama or Peru, they're not going to be able to find that, right? And so the amount of even us trying to get together to source, old equipment and send it to some of these different groups in Brazil, or, it was almost impossible. So one of the things that we've had to work with is right now is we're working on developing a different set of rules and armor requirements for them to be able to make their own, right? To be able to get in different levels. And part of that inclusivity was allowing people that didn't have access to some of the same thing that we do in some of our more industrialized footprints, right? And things like that. And so that's another thing that I just wanted to call out as we all get bigger, we really have to look at the diversity of those that want to, because let's be honest, and I'll say the word that always gets us, but you know, it is also the love of Star Wars that brings them in, right? We keep saying it. You put a lightsaber into their hand, not just an LED combat saber that we say that we have to say to keep ourselves from getting in trouble from the mouse, but an actual lightsaber. You put that into their hand and they touch that button and they hear that buzz. Wow. I don't care what age they are. I don't care who they are. They all are immediately a kid seeing Star Wars for the first time, right? And it's just capturing that globally on it. That helps.
But you know, even I'll say this, and as we've been saying, even people who are not into Star Wars, I can't tell you how many kids that I teach, and I ask them, "So do you watch Star Wars?" They're like, "No." Like, really?
That's
yeah.
for all people.
Why? It's like, why? It's like, why are you here? How did you even? It's like glowing swords. Come on, it's like, what are you gonna do? But that's a really good point. We've had to deal with that a lot because we've been working with France, and lacrosse gear is not existent over there, and the hockey gear is very expensive. So they've had to source all of that there, and that's kind of why the French people have like more kind of uniform looking pads, and it's not so hodgy-podgy as over here, because we tend to just go to play it again and grab one off the rack for $10-20. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a huge problem. This is absolutely massive. I mean, trying to repurpose. I mean, there is a distinction between people who do not use two-handed methods and people who do, because the amount of articulation you need at the shoulder changes quite a lot if you're single-handed out to the side or two-handed out in front.
Absolutely.
And what we find with the hockey kit is it doesn't really allow you to lift your elbows much higher than your shoulders, and this is really important for certain methods, especially. So, I mean, we've been repurposing equipment designed for sports, and you see a lot of people, for example, on the elbows, they're wearing skater gear, which covers the point here. But that's not where you get hit in sword fighting. You get hit on the lateral condyles, not on the actual base here, right? That's where the pad needs to be, which is actually slightly off center. So this is stuff, volleyball kit works better than skater kit because it has that extra coming around. Now, nobody in the world is making purpose-made equipment for LED Saber.
No,
right?
Yes. And I will tell you, there's lots of people that are working on it that see it, right? And I'm not just gonna I didn't mean to interrupt, and I'm not just talking like Spees that like Spez that's deciding to go like with a lighter Gambleson, right? That one that doesn't need the type of protection, right? I'm talking about people that are now particularly, and we're going to start seeing that's the next iteration where we're at. But that's another reason why we need to come up with all of these requirements and basically in the standardization, because we don't want the wild west, to use an American term over here, where everybody is just going to go because, hey, I got a heat gun and some plastron, so I can make whatever I need to make, right?
Right, precisely.
On that note,
and to be honest, I'm having specially made gear made by a company. Unfortunately, it's in Ukraine, that for light sports like Lightspeed and Faisal's and TPLA and us. So, and it covers everything, but it's not a big garrison. It's going to be some plastic substance over foam. They're in the process of fully developing, and they'll be shipping it to me, and I'll do a review on it. But it's going to be lighter than anything, more breathable than anything that's out there now.
I mean, I've looked at it, and I like the work they've done. I don't necessarily like the design, but it's better than anything else out there. But I think the price point at nearly $400 is, again, that's a struggle.
But the 400 was for the entire kit, legs, arms, vest.
Yeah.
You could just buy the vest and then use your own leg and arm protection, which you can get, like he said, played against sports a lot cheaper. It'll work just fine.
I mean,
well, the point is that the reason, even if a company is going to be making purpose-made Saber equipment, right? The reason it's still going to be expensive it's still going to be hard to get, or whatever at the beginning, is because there's not that much return for these companies on it. If we can present a larger group of people who will all buy these products, that represents a market for them, right? Like we've been working with Absolute for, a few years now, right? And it's the same thing, right? It's just they're not going to put any real effort or real money behind any of this stuff unless they know there's enough return on their investment. I mean, and that's the hard the hard fact of it.
We're sponsored by Leon Paul, and they have allowed us to incubate our classes on site at the Olympic Cell here in London for about 7 years. Since the very beginning, they have been our absolute #1 supporters. But the amount of coin you need to drop for the mold on a new mask before it's even tested is something like 20K.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you're like, well, guys, could you make us a mask? They're like, have you got 20K? I'm like, no. And they do the maths, and he's like, right, we would need to sell this many masks to pay for the mold.
Mm-hmm.
Have students? I'm like, no.
Right.
But it's like, this is the problem. They want to help because they are business people, and if there's a community and a market, that means there's a profit. They want to buy in part of this movement from the beginning. That's why they've given us so much grace and allowed us to work with them up to this point, right? So my argument now is sort of looking at that diversity thing. We have to put out instructions for people on how to construct their own bespoke armor at home from base materials themselves. Because if they can't afford, when Leon Paul come into this, it's not going to be cheap. When Absolute come into this, it's not going to be cheap. The cheap option that allows us to get people from, deprived rural areas training without like mummy or daddy's mummy to back them up or whatever, is they're going to have to go to the hardware store and buy foam and some stickers and blah, and they're going to have to make this themselves. And again, the professionalism here is we have to have a pathway that shows them how to make functional armor. This is not something that was on the radar for me a year ago. I was solely concerned with trying to make sabers that I would be happy for somebody to give me to fight with. And once that got out of the way, I was like, right, now I want to wear something that means it doesn't hurt so much. And I have like 20 failed projects on my desk that have all gone straight to the bin because they don't work. You can borrow from Milanese plate designs from 15th, 16th century, but we're not fighting with steel. We're fighting with polycarbonate tubes, and it doesn't work the same way. We have to figure it out, and it has to be DIY at home. And when that community grows large enough, then we will see these other companies investing and getting involved in what we're doing. But until we are coherent, we are not credible. And if we're not credible...
Can I amplify on that? Can I? All right. So you've got a point. I can guarantee you very few people are going to build their own armor, even if you give them the schematics and you give them the material. They're not going to do it. However, this is where the Accords are so brilliant. The Accords will have a number, there'll be some place where you'll be able to look at the Accords, you'll be able to look at the organizations that sign into it, and you'll get a rough idea of what the market really is based on the organizations that will sign the Accord. 11,000 from maybe Saber Legion. I've got 1,500 members in my group, and on and on and on and on and on. And those are real numbers that you can go to somebody and say, will you build us this, and the price point is, and this is the price point we'd like to see at for it. So to do it yourself is there's no doubt that that's a good thing, and there'll be people who'll do it. But my students won't, because I wouldn't know how to do it. I'd have to find a parent to do it for all of us.
So we have, well, I was just going to say, we have both, right? We have both types. And Faisal, as you said it, I'll admit it. We did make armor look cool, right? I mean, we've been able to, with the amount of personalization and customization that people can have it, right? Anywhere from my wife's helmet is, one of the Powder Puff Girls, right? So it's like the sky's the limit. You're allowed to do that. So with that being said, and this also goes to the armor types of things, right? We do have that. And Tony, you've seen our latest rule set. We now have built within it all of our DIY armor specifications down to the millimeter. If you get a caliper out, with 8 millimeters is what you need for your foam gloves, right? It needs to be that bit to get through it, things like that. Because we're starting, if I see another question saying, hey, what about a motocross jacket? And it's like, yes, motocross jacket is fine, but you got to have a plastron chest base because it doesn't have anything for here. It's made to skid, it's blah, blah, blah. So now we're just putting that out there because this is, if we have people across the board, right? From those that, and you mentioned it earlier, I'm a DIYer when it comes to my saber, right? That's the Star Wars, the Jedi, right? I gotta, I make my own saber. I do my own install. That, I keep fixing it. It keeps breaking, because it's naturally going to do it. And so you have the same people that are doing that with their armor, right? They want to make the most elaborate kit starting from the bottom and all the way up. And even though, and Tony, you're absolutely right. Me, I have fencing gear, I have kendo gear, I have hockey gear, did I make any of it? Heck no. Did I augment some of it? Sure, but that's not where that's not my skill set is on that thing, right? I'll have somebody else that makes it more safe than me, right? But again, it's all out there. You got to have it covered because if you're going to start requiring that, you have to be able to get to that next level. Now, the one thing that we don't right now make any Darth Natimus, you're almost 100% responsible for this, is nobody messes around with masks and helmets, right? You did it. Your video is still the best one out there. Why we don't have airsoft, why we don't have any of these other things, why we don't why basically a fencing 3-sport mask, right? That's the minimum, or HEMA, because it's made for that type of thing, until somebody can then go to that next level to where either they've made something safe enough, but that they've actually been able to then prove that it is, right? Right. That's the thing. That's the biggest thing with all of the R&D on some of this stuff. So, so I guess that's my tangent, because we're there as far as people building it. And we also, and I am going to come back to that, we do have people that are out there that want to make stuff specifically for what we do. Right. Here's the Acolyte set, and here's the Jedi set, and here's this type of thing and that type of thing. So it, and not to say it's like Ludo Sport with their uniforms, right, with their attire, but there's a basis behind it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can, if you're new to this sport and you want to get outfitted, hey, here's the company that'll get you all in one, and you can pick the aesthetic that you want. Because I can also tell you that nobody's armor starts is what they finish with, if they even finish at all, right? I mean, you go through a ton of iteration. I don't like this thing, I don't like that thing, this is, so yeah, so it's just an evolving. And so we as an organizations and as far as the Accords have to be able to also allow that maturation, that evolution that's going to happen through the sport. And again, I keep bringing back, which is the thing that I like the most about this, is it's that base, right? That standardization that we've all got. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's professionalism. It doesn't matter if it's armor, safety, training. If we all have something that's standardized, that is that sort of seal. My goal for TSL, one of my goals is, you can look at, and this is a pretty American thing, but you'll look at an American football, right? And it doesn't matter if it's Wilson, Spalding, Reebok, Nike. If it has that NFL logo on it, it's the size, the diameter, everything that it needs. So I want to make a TSL type of brand. If it's this way, that it can hold up to this level of dueling. The same goes for, and it's been mentioned numerous times for the Accords. If there is a school, if there is a group, if there is a league that is part of this, as TSL, I would be more than ample, letting people come and participate without knowing them, knowing that they have this base minimum amount that they do within their organization. And I think that, again, that's where we're at. Being at the base level is just very, very good for all of us right now. And I like the work.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so yeah, so this is, I think we've hit most of these points pretty well. We'll try to, I don't see, not a whole lot of questions or anything like that going on in the comments, but we'll keep an eye on that. So I think now we've kind of gone over each of the little points. We've gone over kind of what we want to do. And so the first thing we should probably do is who can sign up for these right now, how we're going to kind of like manage this, and what's going to kind of happen in the future. Right now, we're reaching out to the organizations out there. The reason we're doing this is because this is the simplest way to start, right? If an organization signs on, that they can then disseminate that information throughout their organization internally. We don't have to, to work on it that way. As we get that settled, we now then have a nice group of representatives and stuff like that. We will come up with ways to reach out to independent schools and stuff. Because if you're an independent, or like this is specifically for independent schools, because if you're a school and you're involved with like TPLA or Silver Sabers or something like that, you're kind of covered under that umbrella. And there are other organizations like that. Right. But if you're an independent school, if you're just, a martial arts school that has a lightsaber program, and you send your people out to fight in different tournaments, TSL, TPLA, or wherever, or Lightspeed, that kind of will cover that, because we want, again, the goal is to try to get everybody, kind of out there. It's not really set up necessarily for individuals, because we're more kind of focused on how the groups will approach individuals and stuff like that. So it's more onto our thing. Yes, Faz, you want to add something?
What we're really looking at here, I mean, individuals can choose to adhere to the principles and virtues.
Of course, yes.
But they are signing on their own behalf, essentially. We're not going to keep a list of every fighter or whatever. What we're specifically looking for is we want the allocated or responsible person from each organization who speaks on behalf of that organization. If they're interested and they'd like to know more, it is those individuals who will be the ambassador between that organization and the institution of the Accords, right? And if everybody has a single person who comes and signs and says, we agree to these principles, and remember, this is reversible, nobody's bound to any of this. If you change your mind, like whatever, it's totally cool.
Yes, there's no international saber police that will come to your door and give you a tarring. Yes.
Damn, I'm up for the wrong meeting.
No. Yes.
Right. These are the games. These are the games, right? We're all in it together, whether we like it or not. We are all doing our own thing, but we are, to the public, doing the same thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, this two people with sabers wearing similar gear. They're not going to make the distinction.
Yeah.
So quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So quick question. So if, let's say, Saber Martial Arts Foundation wants to sign on the Accord, roughly 14 schools in there, do you send them a contract that they sign, and upon signing, send them a digital certificate that they can then print out and put on the wall of the CEO so he can say, we are a member. And then all the schools, he'll send it to all the schools.
Correct.
And they will then put that on their walls. Is that going to be the plan?
That's generally the idea. Yeah.
So I just wanted that to be clear for the audience, because
Yes,
I'm going to
yeah.
certainly be passing along this later to all the groups I'm part of.
Yeah.
So we have like kite marks, which are like safety standards. So any piece of electrical equipment that passes that standard gets a stamp, right? So essentially what we're saying is any organization, training league, whatever, that subscribes and agrees to try and do their best to uphold, they send one person in who represents that particular organization. They sign in their name that this organization will do their best. We then issue them with the ability to say we are signed signatories of the Saber Accords, which will then allow all of the other organizations to check with our database who is local to them that they can invite for events.
Right. And to put people's mind at ease, if you're like an organization, like for TSL, we just expect TSL to take care of its own people. Like there's zero involvement in anybody's group from any other group. Right.
And I would say, and I would really quick say for the individual piece, if you are an individual on this, the way that you can look at this is by looking into an organization and seeing if they are part of the Accords.
Yes.
Right. And if they're not, maybe inform them, right? Because if you're an individual and you're looking for this, that you might have a lot more information than that person does or that school does. So it's an opportunity for you to even, and I'll be honest, this is part of my ABR, right? Always be recruiting. so
Yes.
If we can get foot soldiers out there that want to basically bring this out to other schools as well, that might be, that might have fallen under the radar, absolutely, please do.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Okay. Anybody have anything to add in conclusion here? Matt, you've been quiet. Do you have anything to chime in here?
I popped in where I wanted to add something to the conversation. Anything I might have said, others have said, and frequently far more eloquently.
So in the military, when they teach you to give a brief, you tell the people what you're going to say. Actually say it, and then you recap what you just said to them. So if you would recap what the Accords are in sort of a bullet form, bang, 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 we would be able to end this podcast with them knowing exactly where we're going and what we're doing with the Accords.
There we go. So military efficiency at work. All right. So yes. So as we are going here, the Accords are five things, and maybe I should just read them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll just read our 5 tenets here so that everybody kind of it's out there. If you have any questions about this, if you're, anything like that, please reach out. If you're in the United States, you can reach out to me here at TPLA. If you're over in Europe, maybe reach out to Faz and Silver Sabers. You can also reach out to Tony here if you know him. Going through all that, obviously Charlie. So anybody here, and if you're over in Singapore, I know it's not the right time to be talking to those people right now, but if you're watching this after the fact, go ahead, ask about these things through the Saber Authority, or you can probably get in touch with either Faz or I, either one of us. But okay, so here we go. So our number one issue here, and it starts out here: we as ambassadors, representatives of LDA, Saber fencing, or combat, hereby recognize the following articles of federation. So first one is safety. Safety for participants, spectators, and officials is essential to participation in any sport. This includes, but is not limited to, competition events, group training, personal training. In service of this principle, we believe safety gear is essential for preventing injury and for encouraging engaging gameplay. Appropriate gear enhances the enjoyment of potential of the sport and does not hinder it. Therefore, we pledge to avail ourselves of the physical protection from the rigors of our sport and not on the subjective level of skill of the combatants. Meaning that where there is gear that is needed, we will use the gear and not say, well, we're not just gonna, we just won't hit there. Because as we said before, that's not always an option. So there. And then number 2, we have safe training practices are essential to the growth of athletes, especially the young, and should avoid known causes of overuse injury, risk of traumatic injury, and other practices that can shorten the career of an athlete in the sport. Therefore, we believe that all training practices must meet high standards of biomechanics, safety, and health guidelines. And what this means, and perhaps we did not talk about this in the body of it, but it's often forget. Part of safety is safe training practices. Don't have your students who have never done this before doing 2-person drills with each other with no gloves or anything. That's how hands get snapped. That's all that. Don't have the kids doing things which are going to be, injurious to them. There's lots of these types of things. I'm not going to get into the particulars here, but the safe training practices, if you're running a class, definitely are part of that thing. So there's that. Number 2, we have fair play. Fair play. We agree that fair play is essential to participation and enjoyment of the sport. In service of fair play, we agree that the rules, referees, and officials are needed to govern and arbitrate both the competitive and learning environments. For these factors to be effective in their role, the following must be true. Number 1, rules should be clearly stated and easy to learn and follow. Clear strategies for offenses and breaches of the rules should be swift and fair based on objective observation to the extent possible. Rules should be stable and have only enough variation in them that they can accommodate specific goals to make it simpler for the participant to be involved and engage at a novice level. Meaning, don't keep changing your rule set all over the place, right? Don't invent new rules to kind of cover things that have happened. These are all, as Faisal said earlier, kind of common sense. They're not often stated, but it's something that we kind of feel it has to be. Number 2, arbitration and officiating and refereeing is essential to ensuring fair gameplay. Therefore, all referees in our organizations will meet strict standards of training and experience for any rule set by which they are to officiate. So obviously the leader in our group here is TSL with their very involved training method for their referees and officials. That is something that I think all of us should be striving for. It's something that we are striving for to get started here at TPLA. And so that is one of those very key points. We also say that referees should be charged with the first responder duties and fulfill this purpose with appropriate certifications when on-site medical or emergency services are not available. That means we want there to be medical and emergency services available at any event, because if something happens, God forbid, and there's nobody there, very, very bad things can happen. In order to accommodate people who may not have access to those services, right? Getting referees certified in CPR or having people who are certified in CPR be referees is a very good workaround that particular thing, because referees are there at the action, so they're probably more likely to be involved in those emergencies than anybody else. And if they know how to respond, that's a very, very good thing to have happen there. And then 3, hearing of grievances and resolution of disputes is essential to support a professional group. We agree to provide such processes for any purposes respective of our organizations, groups, or classes. Arbitration of disputes should be held discreetly. So obviously, don't be a John McEnroe. Don't throw your saber off the thing and start yelling at the judge and the referee and stuff like that. We don't really want that happening because we're dealing with a combat sport. and there's lots of people running around with weapons, and we don't want things to get a little heated, because even worse things can happen. All right, on to 3, our professionalism. I'll try to keep this one a little bit short. There's little wordies. We will have a website out for everybody to go check this out. You can read the entire text of this stuff, but I'll just kind of quickly go through here. Professional behavior and attitude are essential for the sport to be respected and accepted in the larger world of athletics and competitive gameplay. This includes protocols and guidelines of any organization, group, or class that need for skill-based instruction from professional teachers and coaches. This obviously also extends to tournaments and stuff like that, which goes right into the fair gameplay. Coaching staff must be qualified, teaching staff, refereeing staff, community teachers and coaches, in order to be robust, must cooperate and find common goals and points of agreement to become standards of behavior. We want everybody to have that professional attitude of, we are colleagues, we're not competitors, right? We want to be able to come to the table and say, hey, I'm having a problem here. How did you guys solve it? And that can be a good dialogue and a good way to bridge those gaps. All right, number 4, diversity. Diversity is essential to grow the art and the sport of LED Saber. The more people that feel welcome in the sport, the more people will bring their unique experiences and skills to the game. This makes the game and sport more dynamic, inclusive, and positive. Therefore, we agree not to discriminate based on race, gender identity, national origin, religious affiliation, disability, or any other points of diverse communities that are irrelevant to the gameplay and administration of the sport. Right. We are open to all cultures unless your culture is the Reavers from Firefly, and you are your culture is to eat everybody else. That we will not allow. And finally, we have autonomy. Autonomy of method is essential to the sport, and this is a sport of multiple traditions and sources. Numbers of styles, sports, and methods for combat with a sword like implements is so great, to ignore them would be a detriment to the overall content and applicability of the sport to diverse groups. Each organization, class, or method is free to apply whatever method they are trained in, to have experience with, or are familiar with, in order to train and coach their athletes. So there it is. That's the basic bullet points. Like I said, we'll have all of this up on a website that you can access. This link will be on all of our social medias. We'll send it out once that is totally live. And we encourage everybody to peruse it, to check it out. And if you have any questions, you can ask any of us. Obviously, if you have something about the core of the accords and stuff, and you want something kind of, a little bit more, deeper to the thing, go ahead and contact me or Faz. Otherwise, pretty much anybody here will be able to encompass that. That's the whole purpose of this, is that we all agree. So you can ask anybody, because we all agree. So there it is. So, okay.
And also, let's not forget, this is simply the core that has established this. We have already got many satellites that are engaged with us directly, yes, who are inquiring about the finer details of how the accords sort of integrate with what they're doing. You guys, you're not alone. This is something that we've set up because, like, we can't really go forward as a community without it. But, even if you don't think that you're ready for something like the Saber Accords, just get involved anyway, because it's the only way we'll be able to factor in your needs. If you don't tell us what you need, we can't change what we're doing. So, it is happening. We've got clubs in France. We have clubs in the UK. We have clubs in Germany. We've got the Saber Authority out in Singapore. We have TSL and TPLA and ACON from the US of A. Things are moving. Mm-hmm. Things come and be a part of it, get involved, and start some of the heavy lifting because my arms hurt.
Right.
So just to make it clear, you got to have a website. The Accords will be on a website, and then the list of people who sign the Accords will also be on the website, correct?
That's
Correct.
right.
So that is a good way. If I were sitting out there as an independent organization doing anything with lightsaber combat, and somebody directed me to the Accords, and I looked down that list, I go, I definitely would want to be part of that group. If Faisal's in there, I want to be there with Faisal.
Tony, I'm here because of you. So, like, we're going in circles now, right? That makes it a dogfight. We up? Game on?
Or a mutual admiration society is what it actually is.
Hey,
We got two brothers. Two brothers.
Yes. And for all the Darksiders out there who may be getting uncomfortable with all this togetherness and stuff like that, let's just remember what Ambrose Bierce defines as an alliance. Two entities which have their hands so deeply thrust into each other's pockets, they cannot separately plunder a third. So even if you're on that tip, this is the right thing to do. All right. Well, I guess we're here at the end here. I cannot thank all of you enough, not only for showing up here for the symposium, but for having faith in the Accords, for being here for that, for taking this sport, this little thing, you know, that just who knew? Who knew? And it's just absolutely mind-blowing. I know to both of us, everything that has grown, and we want to see this keep growing and keep nurturing it, because I think we all have a good thing here. When it got out there, when people come into contact with this, it's fun, it's engaging. You're getting people into things that they may not have ever been into. Just yesterday, I had a person in my class who likes fencing, but wasn't confident enough to go to like fencing. So she took this, and this is something that now that she's done this, she's like, well, I don't necessarily want to go into fencing. So
bottom line, make it easy, right?
Yep.
Give them a glow stick and watch them get A, happier, and B, healthier. And if I leave enough people like that before I die, I did my job, right?
Yep.
That's
well,
it.
Thank you, Foz. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Charlie. Matthew, we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you for all your work and all of you that all you do. Best of luck to everybody. Best of luck to all of us. Best of luck to you out there in Saber world. If you have any questions on any of this, please give us a jingle. Send us an email. We'll try to answer your questions and all of that. We will be posting the website fairly soon on our outlets, so look for that. And if you're interested in getting into this type of thing, you can go actually to the Saber Accords, look at the things. They will all be linked to all these organizations, so you can find one that's near you that you might be into. So, all right. So thank you, everybody here on the panel. Thank you all there at home for bearing with us. We close another symposium here, so I will leave you with patience, practice, perseverance, and happy sabering.
Bye.
Take care.
All right.